Hello everyone, welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar. In this video, we're going to have a look at how to choose an army for Age of Sigmar. This could be useful if you're new to the hobby, or Age of Sigmar in particular, or you've already been playing quite a few years Age of Sigmar like myself, and you just got to the point where you would like to start a new army. So I'll just be showing you the method that I use, how I choose an army at the end of it. So, to start with, we have 4 Grand Alliances in Age of Sigmar. So they are Order, which is, a lot of people think they are your good guys. In one aspect, you're right, they are your good guys, but they are not as, shall we say, good intentions as you would think. They are basically just the most, I don't want to say civilized, but to an extent they are the most civilized races there are out there, and do want to build civilization and sort of, trade with each other, build up economies, things like that. So they are, all intents and purposes, your good guys. The next ones are Chaos. Now, Chaos is pretty much as evil as you can get in Age of Sigmar. I mean, I'm sure you guys if you already play Age of Sigmar, you know this, and if you play 40k, you know Chaos is pretty goddamn evil. I mean, you do have the argument that everyone who starts off on the path, to follow one of the Chaos gods, one of the ruinous powers, doesn't start off with ill intentions, but they slowly get corrupted until the point where they would just, commit huge, atrocious acts for their ruinous powers. So, they are essentially your evil guys. And then you've got the next one, Death, which is, is obviously the best Grand Alliance going. Take it from me, and I'm not biased at all about this, Death is 100% the best Grand Alliance, got the best lore, it's got everything, it's really fantastic. I don't know really much more I can say about it. They are, to be honest, they are the good guys as well. They just want to make a shall we say, all of the realms, they just want to make them purified with order and have a single purpose, and obviously that single purpose is for good. It may just be the only thing what Nagash has on his mind, but he is right and it shall be accomplished. Anyway, then we move on to our last but not least Grand Alliance, which is Destruction. Now essentially these guys, you can call them bad, you can call them evil, but really they don't have intentions enough to be evil, they just want to fight. Now, if it be the ogres who want to fight to basically consume flesh as soon as they can, to just feed their continuous unending hunger, or be it the orcs, which are basically your orcs and your goblins, who just basically want to fight because why wouldn't you? A scrap is always good fun. So those are the 4 Grand Alliances. Now we'll talk about Order first. We'll talk about what armies there are within Order. Now I'm not going to do a talk about the lore of each of these fractions, because I have just done that and it took over half an hour for Order alone, where it ended up being way too long, so I'm just re-recording this just to streamline it. I'm just going to tell you each of the fractions within Order. So, the Yindaneth Deepkin, which are elves, Stormcast Eternals, which are basically heroic warriors reforged into armour. We've got the Seraphon, which are basically dinosaurs riding dinosaurs. We've got Daughters of Cain, which are elves. We've got Cowden Overlords, which are dwarves. We've got the Sylvaneth, which are, I suppose the closest thing you can link them to is Wood Elves. They are elves, but they're also mainly the tree aspect of that, so think like Ents from Lord of the Rings. We've got the Fyreslayers, which are dwarves. We've got the Free People, which are humans. We've got the Wanderers, which are Wood Elves. We've got the Dispossessed, which are the typical dwarves. We've got the Ironwood Arsenal, which is basically where all the artillery is in Order. We've got the Devoted of Sigmar, which are basically crazed with zealots that devote themselves to Sigmar. Pretty much straightforward, as it says on the tin. We've got Darkling Covens, which are Dark Elves. We've got College Arcane, which is the High Elves. We've got the Phoenix Temple, which is the High Elves. We've got Order Serpentis, which is the Dark Elves. We've got the Eldritch Council, which is the High Elves. We've got the Swiftwalk Agents, which is the High Elves. We've got the Order Draconis, which is the High Elves. And we've got Lion Rangers, which are the High Elves. And then finally, Shadow Blades, which are the Dark Elves. Now, when I say they're things like High Elves and Dark Elves, that doesn't mean because they are armies anymore in Age of Sigmar. It's just to give you guys a brief understanding of what I'm saying, because you may know Age of Sigmar really well, and if you do, you will know what Fyreslayers are, but if you're completely new, you might not be able to put the name Fyreslayers to dwarves. So just a brief description there. And each of these fractions, a lot of them can ally together, but bear in mind there is some subjugation in that. For example, a lot of the dark elven fractions, I suppose you could call them, can ally together, whilst a lot of the essentially nicer elf fractions, like the high elves and the wood elves, or what are now things like wanderers and eldritch council, they can ally together. Things like stormcast eternals can ally with everyone. So that's just a brief, basically just a name list of all the fractions within Order. Then we move on to the second biggest Grand Alliance after Order. Now this is Chaos, and they consist of Blades of Khorne, Disciples of Tzeentch, Maggot King of Nurgle, Slaves to Darkness, Hosts of Slaanesh, Clan Scryer, Clan Pestilence, Greyherds, Monsters of Chaos, Demons of Chaos, Clan Verminous, Warherds, Clan Eshen, Everchosen, Clan Moulder, Master Clan, Thunderscorn, and Chaos Garnants. Going back to what I said earlier, Chaos is definitely the most evil Grand Alliance there is. They mainly consist of 5 gods, and those gods are Khorne, which is the god of bloodshed and murder, Tzeentch, which is the god of being able to tell fate and magic and things like mutations, Nurgle is the god of disease and pestilence, and Slaanesh is the god of excess and pleasure. So they are the 4 main gods, and then the 5th one, which has now recently became one of the main gods, is the Great Horned Rat. Now he is the god of the Skaven, and if you're wondering what the Skaven are, they are everything that has a fraction in here. Basically anything that has a clan in front of it is going to be Skaven, and the Skaven are basically rat men. They are absolutely fantastic. The lore behind them is so good, and they're probably the most wackiest army of race, so probably a better word for it now, there is in Age of Sigmar. So just to break it down a little bit more in Chaos, like I said, you've got the gods, and I told you a little about the Skaven. You've also got things like mortal warriors that devote themselves to the gods, and in doing this they lose themselves and they become corrupted. You've got things like the Greyherds, which most people know them as beastmen. They are like half man, half animal. So you've got things like minotaurs. You've got things like gores, which are like a little bit like smaller minotaurs, just things like that. You've got the Monsters of Chaos, which are huge and monstrous beasts that have been mutated by the Chaos powers. You've got Chaos Gargants, which are just like giants. You've got demons, which are basically essences of these huge chaos gods. You could go on for ages explaining the different fractions here. I'm sure you guys know most of them, but I just want to give you a quick summary. So that is Chaos. Next up we have the best Grand Alliance, and that is the Grand Alliance of Death. So the fractions within it are the Legions of Nagash, which is the majority of the Death Grand Alliance. If you don't know who Nagash is, he's essentially the god of death, and these are his minions. So to break it down a little bit more, we have after that Soulblight, which are your vampires. We have Flesh-Eater Courts, who are incredibly just like unending hunger, cannibalistic monsters that can really be the things from nightmares. After that we have the Death Rattle, which are your skeletons. After that we have the Death Lords, which are the Lords of Undeath, and they are things like Nagash. He's obviously one of them. We've got other big name characters there. Then we have Night Haunt, which are your ghosts, Deadwalkers, which are your zombies, and Death Mages, which are your like magic of death wizards, basically your necromancers. So that's just obviously a quick summary. I've done many videos on each of these fractions within the Death Grand Alliance. You're welcome to have a look through on my channel to go and look at the ones you want to. And then that's pretty much it for the Death Grand Alliance. Like I say, they are the best Grand Alliance out there. I wouldn't even bother looking at the others, to be honest, but obviously I'm not biased at all, and that's why I'm talking about all the different Grand Alliances. Now, moving on to our next Grand Alliance, which is our last Grand Alliance, but certainly not the least, and that is Destruction. Now, within Destruction you have the Beastclaw Raiders, which are essentially ogres riding enormous monsters. You have the Ironjaws, which are the most heavily armoured orcs you will ever see. You have the Moonclan Grots, which are basically a load of goblins that eat a lot of mushrooms and run around on these big bouncy balls of lots of teeth. You have the Bone Splitters, which are savage orcs. You have the Gutbusters, which are ogres, which do not essentially mount themselves into big monsters, but they make up with that with sheer ferocity and almost their numbers, which is strange for a Gutbuster army. And then we have the Git mobs, which are goblins again, but they're more less eating mushrooms and more sort of like making inventions and weaponry. We then have the greenskins, which are your typical orcs. Like I say, they might not be the most heaviest armoured, but they make up with numbers which the Iron Jaws cannot do. Then we have the man-eaters, which are ogres that basically are mercenaries. They'll hire themselves out to anyone. And for combat reasons, obviously, not the other reason you might think of, which is absolutely disgusting. Then we have the Troggoths, and they come with 3 different variants. We have the Sour Breath Troggoth, we have the Fellwash Troggoth, and the Stonier Troggoth is the last one, something like that. Basically, you have your river trolls, your mountain trolls, and your cave trolls. And then we have the Spiderfang Grots. Now, they are pretty much how much it says on the tin. They are basically just grots that ride spiders. We have the Ale Guzzler Gargants. Now, not to be confused with the Chaos Gargants. The Ale Guzzler Gargants are giants like the Chaos ones, but they just love drinking and consuming as much ale as possible. Then we move on to our last one, which is the Firebellies, which are basically ogres that are worship their god in the sense of fire. I think that's pretty much how it works anyway, and they can do magic using fire. So, like I say, a bit random explaining all that, but that's pretty much what the destruction are. They're pretty random, and they're just up for a lot of fun. And that's pretty much all there is to say for them. They're not essentially evil, they're not essentially good, but what they are is a force of nature, and nature in its truest form. So now I've told you about each of the Grand Alliances, just very briefly, just to give you sort of a flavour of what each of them is like. You might have already decided actually one of the Grand Alliances you like a lot more than the other, and then you can just look at all the fractions within there and then just pick whichever one you want. But if you need just a bit more deciding, I've now got on the screen the method I use to choose a Age of Sigmar army, and I break it down as your first priorities. Now, for me, number 1 on this is models you like. So this is basically, if you haven't already done this, go on the Games Workshop website, have a look at all the Age of Sigmar models and pick the ones that you like. Models you like is the most important thing to me, just because if you don't enjoy the models, you're not going to enjoy building them or painting them. And if you don't enjoy those 2 things, then you're never going to use them on the table, no matter how much you like the way they play. But, you know, controversy, the second most important thing is how they play. So a game style you like. So, for example, if you like, let's say, an army that has loads of shooting, then you might not want to do a death army, as it doesn't have that much shooting going for it. Or, you know, against that, if a combat army, you're going to want to get something like Blades of Khorne rather than something like Khaldun Overlords. So, like I say, a game style you like is very important. Again, some armies are really fast moving, if that's something you like, to be able to outflank the enemy and stuff like that, against an army that's very much slower and more like a gun line. So, after that, I would say your third most important thing is things like the lore. Now, to some people, they won't care about the story of their army any whatsoever. They just like to either, you know, build the models, paint the models, or play with them. You know, they don't really care about the story at all. But for me, it's a big part of it. I can't do an army if I don't like the story behind it. So that's why I've ranked it up quite highly. So after you've had a look at, you know, what models you like on the website, and then you quite like, you know, the game style they have that army. Now, you don't have to necessarily buy like army books to know what game style is. Their rules for individual units are free for Age of Sigmar, so you can get an idea before you even spend a single penny. And then the lore, again, that's not necessarily free from Games Workshop, but you can easily enough attain that on you know, YouTube or just the internet. So after you've decided those 3 things, you go on to your second priorities, which number 1, I put model range. So that means how many models or units does that army have. So for example, you might really like, let's just go for a very small one. Let's say you like, you know, Spiderfang Grots, just as an example. And you go on the website and they only have 4 different types of models. You're not really going to be able to build too much of an army around it. You can do, but it's going to be a bit repetitive after a while. Probably a better example would be Dead Walkers. They only have 3 units in that army. You're not essentially going to build a huge army around it. You might really want to, and that's absolutely fine. It's how you want to do it, but I'm just trying to give you a little bit of advice, and that's how I look at things anyway. And then the next part on our second priorities is how competitive do you want to be, or to be honest, how competitive do you want this army to be? And also, how updated is this army? Now, the reason why that is important is because you might not be competitive at all, and that's absolutely fine. To be honest, if you're not competitive, or you have no wish to go to tournaments, you're probably, I don't want to say you're a better person, but you're in a better position because you're not having to worry about how good the army can be. You can literally just go for whatever models you want, and that's the best way to play. But if you are competitive, I would say bear in mind to look to see if that army does have a battle tome, which is essentially its army book, it's a codex, because in that battle tome are additional rules to the army that make it that much more competitive. And if you are going to tournaments and you want to do fairly well, you are going to more than likely need a battle tome army, or at least an army that has allegiance abilities within the General's Handbook 2017. Yeah, that's pretty much what I can say for that. So things like, obviously, like Zeech is a top one. You've got Stormcast, which also can be top. You've got Fire Slayers, which are very top tier now. So just another way you want to look at it. And alternatively, if you're saying to yourself, you've already got a competitive army, you don't really need another competitive army, maybe you want an army that is not particularly competitive, just so you can practice on your generalship, or use to be more like, player friendly, if you like, at your local store, you might want to look at an army that's not so competitive. So it really does swing both ways. And then number 3 on second priorities, I've got if you want a horde army or not. Now, this is quite a big thing because there's a lot of armies in Age of Sigmar that are horde armies. Like, for example, you want to go huge on Death Rattle and Legions of Nagash and have loads of skeletons. You're going to need to paint up a lot of skeletons. Or if you want a Skaven army, for example, with lots of models, like a lot of clan rats, you're going to have to paint up a lot of clan rats. So it really depends if you really want to be, if you've got the time or commitment, or you like painting lots of little models. Because all I can say is horde armies, when they're on the table, they look fantastic because there's usually lots of little models with like maybe a monster in the middle as a lovely centerpiece. They look great. But something else you also got to bear in mind is moving them around on a table. Now, of course, you can get movement trays, but even still, it can take. I don't want to paint it in a bad light, but it can be not the funnest army to maneuver around the table. That's how I personally found it with my skeletons anyway. So if you want a horde army or not, it's really up to you. And then number 4 for the second priorities is the painting level for the army. So you might be a really good painter and you might not mind painting lots of details and models and really take them to the next stage, or you might be fairly new, or you might just basically not have a lot of time at the moment to be able to do lots of painting, but you still want to collect a new army, which is very much what position I'm in. So the painting level for the army is things like typically elves have a lot of details on them, and a lot of fine intricate details which can take quite a while painting. And then you also have on the other end of it things like demons of Khorne, like the demon part relates to the Khorne, which are things like blood letters. I'm not saying they're too easy to paint, but they can be easier to paint than, let's say, elves. So have a look on the Games Workshop website and have a look at seeing like how hard is it going to be to paint this compared to something else. Like Stormcast as well is an army that can be pretty easy to paint. And I'm not saying that painting is bad, but I do personally see it as a means to an end to get an army ready on the table. And if you don't have a lot of time and you go for an army that does, sadly take a lot of time to paint, you might give up halfway through, which I really don't want to, see anyone do. So it's just something to bear in mind. And then I move on to my final decisions when it comes to choosing the army. The number 1 there is how popular is the army. So this might be something that doesn't concern you at all, but for me personally, if there's a lot of people in my local area that play, this a particular army, in the store, or when you go to tournaments, a lot of people play with the same army. Like for me, for example, it's things like Zeech and like Stormcast can be quite a big popular one, and Indeneth Deep King is seen to be quite a big popular one, and now Death is as well. So things like that. If I'm starting a new army and I can tell a lot of people play that army I'm thinking about doing, I probably will choose a different army instead, just because I don't want to play the same army as everyone else is playing with, because I find it a little bit boring. You might not at all, and that might not like stop you collecting that army in any way, and that's absolutely fine, but that's just how I personally look at things. And then number 2 on my final decision is, how expensive is the army? Now, this is important because some people have more money than others, and Warhammer, obviously, we all know, can be very expensive. And how expensive is the army can be little things like, does the army have a start collecting box? If you've narrowed it down to 2 armies you want, and one of them has a start collecting box and the other one doesn't, maybe that might be the thing that swings you over to get that start, do that army, because it's got a cheaper way to get into it, which isn't a silly reason to choose one army over another, because at the end of the day, it's all going to cost a lot of money. And if you want to save money any way you can, start collecting boxes are a great way to do it. And then number 3 on that list is the likelihood of Games Workshop support for the army. Now, I mean this as, I don't see there being any armies that are going to be deleted or got rid of at any time, but there are some armies out there that aren't going to get support as soon as some others, like let's say the Eldritch Council, for example, for Order, probably isn't going to get any new models anytime soon. Things like Fire Burleys for Destruction probably aren't going to get any models anytime soon. Things like Death Mages for the Grand Alliance Death probably aren't going to get any models soon. And those 3 factions I just pointed out aren't really armies in themselves, but it's just something to bear in mind. Like, to look at a bigger army, for example, things like let's say Spiderfang Grots. Now, they have 4 units in that army. That is, and it works out that you can build an army of just spidering Grots. It works, but they're so small they're probably not going to get an update anytime soon. I don't know anything about that, but it's just something to look out for. When you compare it to something like Nighthorn, not saying they are going to get an update soon, but there are hints that they will. So it's just things like that. It's just having a look on the Warhammer community page, see what's a popular topic at the moment, and really judging it by that. And then number 4, which is the last thing, and it's just how excited are you by the army. If you've narrowed it down to this point, you've got 2 armies, let's say, and one of them you're like, oh yeah, I really like how that plays in game, and yeah, my friend's got it, and he does really well with it, and yeah, it should be good fun. And then the other army you're like, oh, I just look at the models and absolutely fantastic, I just really want to do the army, just really excited, like we're building and painting it, and got my own theme, I'm going to go for it, and I can't wait to get them on the table and like see how they play. The difference between those 2 things, like being like, oh well, I've heard they're quite good, and I've told that I've been told that they can do great things, they can do this, what, and the other, but you don't really have that sort of passion in you, like, for wanting to do that army. It might just me who gets passions for when I go into a store and I'm like, I'm going to start that army today and get really excited. No one else might be like that, but I severely doubt. I think we all get quite excited about the prospect of starting a new army. So just a little bit of thing to have at the end there. So for me, when I get to the first priorities, I probably have about maybe anywhere like 7 armies or whatever. For me, it's just like any army, to be honest. And then after the first priorities, when I get to the second priorities, I probably narrowed it down to 3 different armies. And then when I get to the final decision, it usually comes down to 2, or maybe I might already have my own army. So again, this is only just like a way of choosing an army model, which I go through. Might not work for you guys, but I just thought I'd tell you, just to in case you're struggling to come up with reasons why you want to do army, reasons you don't, this might just help you. So I recently just went through this, like yesterday, I think, how I decided to do my next army, because I'm sure if you've been watching some of my latest videos, I've been bouncing around all the ideas I want to do for an army and not been able to narrow it down. So like I said, I went through this method and I have came up with a decision, and knowing me, I'll probably change my mind next week, but at the moment I'm happy with the decision I came with. So First of all, first prize. So the four armies I had to consider were Seraphon, Internet Deepkin, Gutbusters, and Ironjaws, and they all fitted in the category for models I liked. I liked all of them. A game style I like. I liked all of them, to be honest. I was quite excited about all of them. And then the lore you like. Now this is where I was a little bit struggling. So Internet Deepkin, really like their lore. Ironjaws, really like their lore. Really fun. Gutbusters, lore lacking a little bit, if I'm honest, so it wasn't too much there. And then for the Seraphon, I'm in conflict with this because I absolutely really don't like their lore they've got at the moment. Might just be me, you guys completely disagree with this, but I just think it's a bit too vague and not really described enough. They're like celestial beings made of light and memories and brought down by the slan. So it's a little bit of a shame there for the lore for me. However, the lore they had back in the world that was, absolutely loved it. Loved Lustria, loved all the sort of the temple cities and all that, and I loved the different species within the lizardmen. Thought that was fantastic. So for me, Seraphon is still lizardmen, and they still have all that lore because I'm just going to bypass essentially the new crap they've got, in my honest opinion. So then moving on to the second priority, so we've still got intact all those four armies, they're still there, still want to do all of them. And the second priority is we now look at the model range. Now, Internet Deepkin, absolutely solid, they're brand new models, they've got models coming out all the time over the next few weeks, and as the new models, that means things like mold lines aren't going to be a problem. They're going to be really nice, crisp and clear, be a few mold lines, but easy enough to get rid of. They'll go together really nicely. They're brand new designs, and the models are fantastic, and there's plenty amount of them. And then move on to, let's say, the next one, say Ironjaws. I really like the models. Like I said, they haven't got the smallest model range, but not the biggest, and there's no word of them getting new models anytime soon. Move on to Gutbusters. They haven't got the smallest model range again, but I don't see them getting any models anytime soon. To be honest, I don't see that happening. And then Seraphon, I don't know if they'll get any models anytime soon, but they have got a really big model range at the moment. They've got like 30 different units or something. Not war scrolls, like 30 different separate models you can get, which is really, really nice. And then number two, how competitive do I want the army to be? No, I never like going for super competitive armies. You might argue that I've got a death army and they can be very competitive, but I did that before the new book, so I beat you to it. But I never like going for, like I say, the most competitive army. When I go to tournaments, I never plan to win them, but I love to come the top, 20 or 25, something like that. So I do care about competitiveness, but I do like to play at my local store. People aren't so competitive, so I like it to be flexible. So the Internet Deepkin, they look like they can be very competitive. They look like in tournaments they can win at least 4 games if you play well with them. Seraphon, I think they're like a 3 to 4 game army. They can be very good, but they can just be shot down by different armies. But they've got plenty of tricks up their sleeves and plenty of variety. Ironjaws, quite similar to Seraphon in the style of how many games they can win, I think. They can be competitive. You can just play like an orc with them, just charge at the enemy, which is probably a really fun way to play them. But, they can be competitive as well. And then Gutbusters, which I think can win 3 games at a tournament, maybe at the most. You might prove me wrong, completely wrong with it. But they don't have enough synergy, in my opinion, to be completely competitive, which for me is why I'm going to eliminate Gutbusters from the armies I want to start, just because they don't have enough synergy for me. That's the reason. Lovely high damage models and all that sort of thing, but the only thing that really gives them synergy is just like the Butcher, which I'm not saying it's bad, but that's the only thing that gives the army synergy. It's just a bit of a shame, really. So, like I say, like the Gutbusters, but for that reason they're gone. So I'm just down to Internet Deep King, Seraphon, and Iron Jaws. Then number 3 is if I want a Horde army or not. I'm not really looking for a Horde army. I don't mind a medium sort of amount of models for an army, but I just don't have the time to paint up a Horde, unfortunately. And I've got plenty of skeletons to fill that purpose anyway. So for me, all 3 of those armies don't have to be a Horde army, so that's fine. The painting level for the army, it's probably the same for all 3 of them. Internet Deep King probably needs a bit more painting on that, probably take a bit longer, but I love them a lot so much, don't really mind. And then we move on to my final decision. So I've got 3 armies here, and you know, I have to try and get down to 1 in my final decision. So how popular is the army? Now for me, Iron Jaws are fairly popular, but not too popular. There's probably a couple of people who play at my local store. Seraphon, there's like 1 person who plays in my local store. They're really not particularly popular. And the Internet Deep King, there hasn't been any armies played in the Storm yet, because obviously they're very new and all their models have came out on the time of recording this video. But I think like 5 people have started them in my store. So if I was to do them, I'd be the 6th person. And although I love the models, I can appreciate them with not having to do the army myself. So for that reason, I've eliminated Internet Deep King from this list. Now, if you saw the last video I did with Twin Coot, I said I was definitely going to do an Internet Deep King army. I was really excited, which I am. But and the models are lovely, and the new, so like building them is going to be really nice because there's no like mold, or very few mold lines on them and all that sort of thing, and they fit together well. But too many people are doing the army, so I want to be different and just not essentially just jump on the bandwagon. Like I say, I like doing different armies. Like I was the only one doing Death in my store, and now that they became quite popular, I want to do a different army to be different from everyone else, essentially. So we're down to Iron Jaws and Seraphon. And then the next part is how expensive is the army. They're both quite affordable armies. They both have star collecting boxes. And they're priced fairly, well. I would say they're probably about the same sort of par. Maybe Seraphon are more expensive because there's certain like characters you have to buy separately, certain heroes and all that, but I'd say they're about the same. Number 3, the likelihood of Games Workshop support for the army. They're pretty much the same for both of them. Iron Jaws is like a new army, a new Age of Sigmar army. It's got the Yard Boys, but like, he used to be the Black Ops. But apart from that, it's like a new Age of Sigmar army that hasn't been touched since it's been released. And Seraphon, they are an old army. They used to be the Lizardmen, but they were given a battle tome relatively soon after Age of Sigmar came out. Now, they haven't been given an updated battle tome, but like Iron Jaws, they've been given allegiance abilities in the General's Handbook 2017. And strangely enough, because they've been given allegiance abilities on that, it means there's less likely a chance of a battle tome coming out for them soon. But it indicates Games Workshop has support for that army. So they're both the same there. And then when it comes down to the 4th thing on my final decisions, how excited am I by the armies? Now, Iron Jaws, they're a really fun army to just want to run up and smash in the face. Really good laugh. And then it's a really good fun playstyle. You can really have good fun of it at the store. If you don't want to be competitive, just charge forward and smack your chopper in the enemy's face. The orcs aren't the most intelligent creatures in the mortal realms, but it doesn't take that much intelligence to pick up a large, heavy, metal sharpened item and then just plunge it into your opponent's skull. So, like I said, they're quite fun and all that sort of thing. And then Seraphon, I don't like calling them Seraphon, so I'll be referring to them as Lizardmen. It's an army I did when I was a kid. I only had a few things because I was a kid. I only really had stuff that my parents bought for me, and obviously they didn't want to spend loads of money on Warhammer, so I only had the small bits here and there. And I always wanted to make a big full army of them with all things like, the big like carnosaurs and the big dinosaurs, really. And absolutely love dinosaurs. And I'm really, really excited by them. So I have pushed Seraphon, or Lizardmen, like I said, I like to call them, above Iron Jaws and to kick Iron Jaws out of the list. So that means I'm left with Seraphon, and the reason is just because I'm really excited about it. I just really like, basically, I really like dinosaurs, and I'm a huge fan of things like Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, and I've played on Total Warhammer 2 and played as Seraphon, and just when you get to actually see like the models, move around and all that, and the animations, it just makes you love them even more. And I also just really like the models. So you've got things like the Carnosaur, which is essentially just a T-Rex, but it's absolutely awesome. It's really fantastic. You've also got things like the alternative building that, like a Troglodon, which is basically Spinosaurus. You've got your Stegodon, which is basically your Triceratops. You've got your Mastodon, which is your Ankylosaurus, and all just really cool. I'll put some pictures up here that you can see of like the models, and for me, it really excites me, and it's an army that I also look forward to paint as well, because I probably will be painting them in the traditional scheme, which is them being blue and then obviously their mounts being different colours, just because funny enough, I've seen since Age of Sigmar came out, a lot of people paint them in new interesting ideas, but because I've seen so many new interesting ideas, I don't really see the old scheme anymore, which is why not many people have painted it that way, and why I'm going to be a bit retro and go back to it. So like I say, that's why I really like and I haven't obviously started with them, but I have got my first purchase of them, which is the start collecting box of them. And out of this, I plan to make the Carnosaur with the old blood on top of it, because I think that's the most powerful one. You've got the Saurus Warriors as well, and then the Saurus Knights. I'm not gonna lie, some of the models I don't like so much, like the Saurus Knights do look a little bit dated and things like that, but I'm sure I'll find a use for them. And yeah, so that's the decision I came for. I hope you can hear just how energetic I am about starting the army. Don't really have any time to do it at the moment, but screw work sometimes. You can always try and find a way. I mean, it'll be a very, very, very slow build army, but I do hope in the future to do like things like videos on tactics for them, or just like their lore, just talking about their war scrolls, and really get the ball rolling with them over the next month, hopefully. And if you would like to see videos on them, and in particular things, please let me know down in the comments, and I will certainly get to it. And if you don't want me to do videos on Seraphon, then I might just do it anyway, to be honest, because I'm that excited. But if you really don't want me to do videos on them, I won't. But if you, like I say, if you don't want me to do videos, please come up with different suggestions what you would like to see, as that's always really helpful. So this is the method I use to choose an army, and like I said, I've proven it by telling you the army choice that I've gone for. And I really hope it's helped you. It might not have helped you. You might pick an army in very different ways. You might think my idea is completely rubbish, which you're more than welcome to have that idea, to think like that. And like I say, I hope this has really helped you. Please let me know down in the comments of what army you're thinking about choosing, or if you've recently started an army, or you've been doing an army for a long time, you just want to stick with it. Just let me know the reasons, and it'll be really good just to have a chat about it. And that's pretty much the end of the video, guys. So again, I thank you very much for watching this. If you've enjoyed it and you haven't already, please like, subscribe and comment down below, as there's always encouraging me to make as many videos as I possibly can. I'm really happy to see how big the channel has grown, over 300 subscribers now, which is absolutely fantastic. Didn't think I'd ever get this many, so that's a really big thank you from me to all of you guys watching this. You guys can't support me enough. And until next time, I thank you very much for watching, and remember, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.